Grimm's Fairy Tales. Rapunzel. There was once a man and a wife who had no children, but who often wished they had at least one little boy or girl. They lived in a small house, and next to their house was a beautiful garden surrounded by a wall. The garden was owned by a witch who was said to possess great powers. Everyone who lived in that land feared the witch and avoided her. From an upstairs window the wife could see over the wall into the garden. One day as she stood at the window looking down, she noticed the most beautiful radishes growing in the garden. As soon as she saw them, the wife felt the great desire to eat them. Every day she would look out the window into the garden and wish she could eat those beautiful red radishes. Because she knew she could not have them, the wife desired the radishes all the more. She thought about them so much and wanted them so badly that she made herself ill. She became very pale and would not eat and lay about the house all day feeling miserable. Her husband, who loved her very much, noticed how ill she looked and asked, "What is bothering you, my dear?" "It's those radishes growing in the garden behind our house," she told him. "If I can't get some of them very soon, I think I will die." This frightened her husband so that he made up his mind to get the radishes, for he did not want his wife to die. That night he climbed over the wall, seized a handful of the radishes, and brought them home. His wife felt better at once. She got up out of bed, made the radishes into a salad, and ate them with great enjoyment. They were so delicious that the next day she wanted more, and insisted that she couldn't have them, she would surely die. All the day and all the following night she lay in bed complaining about how badly she needed more of the wonderful radishes. Finally, her husband climbed over the wall just before daybreak and made his way to the radishes. To his horror, he found himself face to face with the witch, who glared at him with a terrible scowl. She was very tall and old, with big, black, shiny eyes, a pointed nose like a spike, and fingernails that were longer than her fingers. "How dare you come into my garden?" she said in a low, growling voice. "So you're the thief who's been stealing my radishes. I will make you suffer for this." The terrified man fell to his knees and begged the witch for mercy. "Oh, please," he said, "I only stole your radishes because I had to. My wife saw them from her window, and I wanted them so badly. She would have died if she could not have eaten some." He begged and pleaded so well that the witch's heart softened, and she said, "Take all the radishes you want, but you must pay me something in return." "But I am a poor man," answered the husband. "How can I pay you?" "You and your wife will have a child," replied the witch. "When it is born, you must give it to me. I will take very good care of it, so you needn't worry." Afraid of what the witch might do if he did not agree, the husband consented. Then he helped himself to the radishes and returned home. A year later the wife gave birth to a baby girl. The witch was at the door immediately and took the child away from her. As soon as the witch had the baby in her house, she named her Rapunzel. The baby grew up to be the most beautiful girl in all the land, with long, beautiful hair, as fine and yellow as spun gold. The witch was very careful to keep Rapunzel hidden behind the garden wall, but as the child grew more and more beautiful, the witch became fearful of losing her to the first handsome man who might come along. When Rapunzel was 12, the witch decided to remove her from the world and keep her all to herself. Deep in the forest, the witch built a tower that had only one room, and that room was at the very top of the tower. It had no doors, no stairs, and only one window. In that room Rapunzel was shut up by the witch. When the witch wished to visit Rapunzel, she would stand at the foot of the tower and call out, "No door to enter, no mount to stair, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." As soon as Rapunzel heard the witch's voice, she would open the window and let her long yellow hair fall down all the way to the ground. The witch would seize it with both hands, and, with great effort, for she wasn't as young as she used to be, she'd pull herself all the way up. Rapunzel lived for years this way at the top of the tower. Her only amusements were singing and combing her hair. One day a young prince came riding through the forest and heard a voice singing the song. "Here I have lived, alone and apart. Who shall find the key to my heart? No step to climb, no tread, no stair, shall lead the way to Rapunzel fair." At first the prince could not find where the voice was coming from. Then he saw the tower and heard the voice coming from the top. But though he walked all around the tower and examined it carefully, he could not find a way in, so he rode away. Rapunzel's song, however, had sunk deep into his heart, and he could not forget the sound of that sweet voice. So every day the prince left his palace to ride into the forest, and there he would spend his days listening to Rapunzel sing. One day, as he stood behind the tree listening, he saw the witch approach the tower. The witch stood at the foot of the tower, and called, "No door to enter, no mount to stare. Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." The prince saw a beautiful rope of bright yellow hair descend from the top of the tower. The witch seized it with both hands, climbed up, and disappeared out of sight. "So that is how one gets into the tower," said the prince to himself. "I must see if I can get in too, for I must find the owner of that lovely voice." The next day the prince rode into the forest and stopped at the tower. He got off his horse, stood at the foot of the tower, and called, "No door to enter, no mount to stare. Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel heard him, and thinking it was the witch, she let down her hair. The prince seized it with both hands, and being much younger than the witch, she climbed up and into the tower much faster than she did. Rapunzel was very frightened when she saw the prince instead of the witch climb into her room, for she had never seen a man before. The prince, however, spoke to her very kindly. He told her that he had heard her singing, and had been so enchanted with the sound of her voice that he had to see her. As they talked, the prince and Rapunzel came to like each other very much. The prince fell in love with her and asked her to marry him. Rapunzel looked at the prince and saw that he was young and handsome, and certainly a great improvement over the ugly witch, who had been her only companion for many years, and so she said yes and gave him her hand. "I would go away with you at once," she said, "but there is no way for me to get down. However, if you bring a roll of silk each time you come, I will make a ladder. When it is finished, I will climb down with you, and you can take me away from here on your horse." The prince and Rapunzel also agreed that they would meet only in the evening, since the witch usually came during the day. And so they did for a long time, while Rapunzel worked on her silken ladder. One day the witch came to visit Rapunzel, but since she was getting older, she was very tired that day. She took a long time climbing up. When she finally climbed in through the window, Rapunzel, who had to stand there for a long time with her hair hanging out, forgot herself and said, "My, you took a long time getting up here. The prince climbs up at no time at all." When the witch heard that, she was furious. "So you are no longer mine," she shrieked. "We'll soon take care of your prince." The witch wrapped Rapunzel's hair around her hand, seized a scissors with the other, and cut all her hair off. Then, with a wave of her hand and a magic spell muttered under her breath, she whisked Rapunzel away from the tower and placed her in the midst of a desert. No one ever came to the desert because it was so dry and barren. Then the witch returned to the tower to wait for the prince. As evening fell, the prince rode up and called, "No door to enter, no stair to mount, no stair. Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." The witch had tied one end of Rapunzel's long yellow hair to the window latch. Now she let the other fall to the ground and waited while the prince climbed up. As the young man jumped into the room, to his horror and amazement he found himself face to face, not with his beloved, but with the witch. She glared at him with her terrible eyes. "So," she cackled, "you thought you could find a wife here, did you? Well, your beautiful bird is no longer in her nest. The cat has taken her away, and now the cat will scratch your eyes out." She leapt towards the prince. The prince was so overcome with grief at losing his Rapunzel that he went mad for a moment and jumped out of the window. Luckily he fell into some bushes, but the sharp thorns on the bushes scratched his eyes so badly that he could not see. Alone and blind, the prince wandered about the forest, living on berries and roots, weeping and lamenting for his loss of Rapunzel. He wandered about in his miserable way for several years, and one day he found himself at the edge of the desert in which the witch had placed Rapunzel. As he wandered over the sandy waste, he heard a voice singing, "Here I live, alone and apart. Who shall find his way to my heart? Nothing but sand so brown and bare, no road leads to Rapunzel fair." Even though the prince was blind, he followed the sound of Rapunzel's voice. As he approached her, she recognized him at once and burst into tears. She threw her arms about him, and her tears bathed his eyes and healed the scratches. In moments the prince was able to see again. Then the prince led Rapunzel out of the desert and through the forest to his kingdom. There they were married and lived for a long time, content and very happy. The witch, when she learned that she had lost Rapunzel for good, shut herself up in the tower and spent her days trying to get travelers to climb up Rapunzel's hair to keep her company. Her voice, however, was not as sweet as Rapunzel's, so no one ever cared to make the climb. The witch was left with no one to keep her company but herself. And that is the end of Rapunzel, told by the Grimm brothers. Thank you all for joining me. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. And I do think it's very interesting that if you didn't know this about the Grimm brothers, that most of their tales are very gruesome. And they're like, Disney just put nicer twists onto them. But that's that, and I think it's also funny that boys are often enchanted by girls' voices in Disney. But okay, that's enough of my thoughts. Thank you all for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful day.